Imagine you could take a person and cut them in two. Not their body, their mind. Imagine a single, simple surgery that splits your memory clean down the middle, so that the version of you that goes to work and the version of you that goes home never meet. They share a body. They share a face. But they have no access to each other. The one at work does not know your name, your family, whether it's summer or winter, or that there's a world outside the building at all. And the one at home does not know and does not want to know what happens to the other one for 8 hours a day. That's the premise of Severance, the show everyone's been talking about, one of the most acclaimed series of the decade, and most people watch it as a brilliant piece of science fiction, a horror story about work, about corporations, about what we let ourselves become for a paycheck. All of that is true, but it is not what the show is about at the deepest level. Because that premise, a self divided into two, a hidden self trapped in a windowless world it can never leave, cut off from a truer self it can't remember and can't reach, is not new. It is the oldest description of the human condition there is. It is exactly, precisely, in almost every detail, what a group of people called the Gnostics said had happened to your soul, not as a metaphor, as the literal architecture of what you are. Severance is secretly about the Gnostic divided soul, and once you see it, you can't watch the show the same way again, because you'll realise it isn't a story about them, it's a documentary about you. This hour opens it, what the Gnostics said about the severed soul 2,000 years ago, why the show maps onto it point for point, and the part that should make the back of your neck prickle, which one of the two selves you actually are right now. The written work is at enlightens.guru, and the discount on the books is in the comments if you want to go further tonight. The podcast is on Spotify if you'd rather close your eyes and listen in the dark. I won't interrupt again. Stay to the end, because the end is about your own severance, the one no one gave you consent to perform. Let's start with what the show actually is. For anyone who hasn't seen it, here's the setup, and it's worth getting exactly right, because the details are where the whole thing lives. A biotech company called Lumon Industries offers certain employees a procedure called Severance. A chip is implanted in the brain that splits their consciousness by location. The moment you step into the elevator down to the severed floor, you become one person. The moment you step back into the elevator to leave, you become another. And the two never touch. The show gives them names. Your work self is your innie. Your outside self is your outie. And here is the horror the show builds everything on. The innie has no life outside the office. None. It is born the first time it wakes up on that floor. And as far as it experiences things, it never leaves. Every day for the innie is the same. It opens its eyes in the elevator, works a full shift doing tasks it doesn't understand, and then steps back into the elevator, and instantly it's the next morning, and it's back at work, having experienced not 1 second of rest or home or sky. The innie works forever. It has never seen the sun. It doesn't know if it has a family. It doesn't even know its own full name. Its entire universe is a set of fluorescent lit white corridors underground, and the work it's told is mysterious and important. We follow a small team of these innies, Mark and Helly and the others, in a department doing something called Macrodata Refinement, which means sitting at old computers sorting numbers into bins because certain numbers make them feel afraid, for reasons no one will explain. And over the course of the show, these innies begin to do the one thing Lumon never wanted them to do. They begin to wonder, to suspect there's more than the floor, to want out. Now on the surface, this is a razor-sharp satire about work-life balance and what corporations extract from us, and it works beautifully as that. But sit with the actual structure of it for a second, stripped of the office setting. A self divided in two. A hidden self trapped in an enclosed world it can never leave, doing endless meaningless labour with no memory of where it came from, no knowledge that a truer self and a wider world exist just above it, and a slow dawning suspicion, the first crack, that this is not all there is. That structure is thousands of years old. Let me tell you who described it first. 2,000 years ago, the Gnostics looked at the human being and said something that sounds today exactly like the premise of Severance. They said, "You are divided," that inside every person there are, in effect, two selves, and that most people live their entire lives as the wrong one, with no access to the other, and never even know it. Here's their version. There is in you a true self. They called it the divine spark, a fragment of the real, of the true source, your original and deepest identity, the you that came from home. And wrapped around it, laid over it, is a second self, a false self, built by and for this world, made of fear and appetite and routine, that has no memory of the true self and no knowledge of where it came from. And here's the devastating part. Almost everyone is completely identified with the false self. You spend your life as the wrapping, the anxious working self tuned entirely to this world, while the true self, the spark, sits underneath, forgotten, unreached, like a person you share a body with but have never met. Read that against the show, and the hair should stand up on your arms. The innie is the false self, the self that knows only this world, this flaw, this labour, with no memory of anything higher, and no idea there's more. The outie is the truer self, the one that exists in the wider world, the one the innie can't reach and can barely imagine. And the tragedy of the innie, trapped underground, working forever, never having seen the sky, not even knowing its own name, is the exact tragedy the Gnostics said had happened to your soul. You are, right now, they would say, living as the innie, cut off from your outie, doing the labour, under the fluorescent lights, having forgotten there's a sun. The show made literal, with a surgical chip, the thing the Gnostics said is the invisible condition of every human being who ever lived. That's why it hits so hard, and so strangely, deeper than a workplace satire has any right to hit. You're not just watching a clever premise. Some part of you recognises it. Let me show you why, piece by piece, starting with the innie itself, and what it really is. Look closely at the innie's existence, because every detail of it is a Gnostic doctrine in disguise. The innie is born into a windowless place. No sky, no horizon, no outside, just enclosed corridors under artificial light. The Gnostics said the material world is exactly this, an enclosure, a place with no visible way out, lit by a false light rather than the true one, that presents itself to its inhabitants as the whole of reality. The innie can't see out because there is nothing to see out to as far as it knows. The soul in the world, they said, is in the same condition, sealed in, convinced the enclosure is everything. The innie has no memory of an origin. It didn't come from anywhere it can recall. It just woke up here, already at work, and the not remembering is total. This is the single most important Gnostic idea about the human condition, forgetting. They said the soul came from somewhere, from the true source, the home above, but that in descending into this world it forgot, completely, where it came from and what it is. The innie's amnesia is not a plot device. It is the human condition as the Gnostics diagnosed it. You are here, working, and you cannot remember the home you came from, and most people don't even know there was one. The innie is told its work is mysterious and important, and that serving is its purpose. It is never told why. It sorts the numbers because it's told to, on faith forever. The Gnostics said the powers that rule this world, they called them the archons, the rulers, keep the soul occupied, obedient, and incurious, labouring at tasks whose real purpose is hidden from it. Told that to serve is enough, and that it shouldn't ask what for. The innie serving Lumon without knowing why is the soul serving the rulers of this world without knowing why. And notice the cruelty in both. The labour isn't really for the worker's benefit, it's for the systems. It keeps the worker down there, busy and asleep. And the innie experiences no rest and no escape. Every exit just loops it back to more work, an unbroken cycle of labour with no release. The Gnostics had an image for that too, the soul caught on a wheel, returning again and again to the same toil, the same forgetting, never getting out, because the system is built to recycle it. The innie stepping into the elevator to leave and instantly arriving back at work the next morning, that seamless, restless loop, is one of the most quietly horrifying things in the show, and it's a perfect picture of what the Gnostics called the trap, an existence engineered so that the exit is really just the entrance again. So the innie is the soul in the world, enclosed, forgetful, labouring for a purpose it isn't allowed to know, caught in a loop with no rest. Which raises the question the show and the Gnostics both force you to ask. If someone built this enclosure and runs it and profits from keeping you asleep in it, who is that? The show has an answer, and it wears a very particular face. Let me tell you about Lumon, and about the man they worship. The innies don't just work for a company, they live inside a religion. And this is where Severance stops resembling the Gnostic vision and starts being it. Lumon Industries is not a normal corporation. It is a cult built around the worship of its long-dead founder, a man named Kier Eagan. His portrait hangs everywhere. His words are scripture, a handbook the innies are made to revere, full of his sayings and principles and a list of human tempers to be mastered. His life is taught like the life of a saint. Employees are expected to love him, quote him, model themselves on him, and treat his teachings as the highest truth. A dead man, elevated to a god, ruling the enclosed world through a book of his sayings and an army of managers who enforce his will. Hold that against the Gnostic story, because it lines up with something they said that got them branded as heretics and nearly erased. The Gnostics said the God who made and rules this lower world is not the true God. He is a lesser being. They called him the Demiurge, the craftsman, who built the enclosure, demands worship, insists he is the highest and only power, and keeps the souls inside ignorant of the true source above him. He is a false god presiding over a false world, and the whole apparatus of the world's religion, in their view, was the cult of this lesser maker, mistaking the builder of the prison for the lord of all reality. Kier Eagan is that figure, rendered as a corporate founder, the worshipped maker of the enclosed world. The false god whose scripture keeps the innies obedient, whose image is everywhere, who insists his way is the only way, and who exists, as far as the innies are concerned, as the highest authority in their universe, when in fact, he's just the man who built their cage. And the management, the middle-tier bosses who surveil and punish and enforce the founder's rules, who move through the corridors making sure no one wakes up or steps out of line, those are the archons exactly, the ruling powers who administer the false world and keep the souls in it from escaping. The show even gives them that flavour, serene, procedural, quietly menacing. Utterly convinced of their own righteousness, they are the enforcers of a false god's order. That's not my reading strained onto the show. That's the show's own design. And the deepest Lumon horror, the reason the founder cult is so unsettling, is the same reason the Demiurge was the Gnostics' most provocative idea. Both are saying, the thing presented to you as the highest good, the thing you're told to serve and revere, the maker of the only world you know, might not be the real one at all. It might just be the one who built the room you can't see out of. But why keep souls down there at all? What's the work actually for? The show is careful never to fully answer that, and the Gnostics would say the refusal to answer is the answer. Let me tell you what the work is really for. Here is one of the show's cruelest, cleverest strokes. The work makes no sense. The innies sort numbers into bins because some numbers feel scary. They're told it's important. They're never told what it's for. The meaning is withheld from the very people doing it. And they do it anyway, all day, forever, on faith, because serving is the whole of their assigned purpose. Sit with how strange that is as a design choice, because it's the key to everything. You could tell a story about workers exploited for an obvious product, but the show deliberately makes the labour opaque, meaningless from the inside, its true purpose hidden above the workers' pay grade, possibly serving ends the workers would be horrified by if they ever understood them. And that opacity is the point. The work isn't really there to accomplish the task. The work is there to occupy the worker, to keep the innie busy, obedient, incurious, and down on the floor. A soul that is always working never has a quiet moment to ask the dangerous question, what am I, and why am I really here? The Gnostics said this was the deepest function of the world's machinery, not merely to use the soul, but to keep it asleep, to fill its existence so completely with tasks and demands and fears that it never falls still enough to wake up and remember. They said the rulers of this world don't need to chain the soul if they can simply keep it distracted. A soul that never stops labouring, never stops wanting, never stops fearing, will never notice it's imprisoned, because it never has a spare moment to look. The Macrodata Refinement, endless, meaningless, anxiety-driven sorting that fills every hour and explains nothing, is a perfect image of it. The work is the sleep, the busyness is the cage, and the genius of the cage is that it doesn't feel like one, it feels like a job you have to do. And you feel this, don't you, without any chip in your head? The way a life can fill so completely with tasks and obligations and screens and low-grade worry that years go by and you never once stop to ask what any of it is actually for. The way I'm just so busy becomes a whole existence. The Gnostics would say, that's not an accident of modern life. That's the oldest technique there is for keeping a soul from waking. Keep it refining the numbers. Keep it afraid of the scary ones. Keep it from ever looking up. But the whole show turns on the fact that, eventually, one of them looks up. The system is almost perfect. Almost. And the crack in it is the most hopeful thing in the story. Let me tell you about the waking. From the first minutes of the show, one innie refuses. Helly wakes up on that floor and immediately wants out. She doesn't accept the corridors as the whole world. She doesn't buy that serving is enough. She tries to send a message to her outie. She tries to quit, which for an innie is a kind of death, because the innie has nowhere to go. She would rather risk ending than accept that this enclosure is all there is. And slowly her refusal spreads. The others begin to catch it. They start to suspect there's a world above the floor. They start to want to reach it. And look at what her refusal costs, because it tells you how serious the waking is. For an innie, to try to quit is to try to end. She has no outside to escape to, so choosing not to accept the enclosure means risking her own erasure. She would rather cease than pretend the corridors are the whole world. That is not recklessness. It's the exact courage the Gnostics said the waking requires. The moment you truly see the enclosure for what it is, the comfortable version of your old existence starts to look like a kind of death anyway, and you become willing to risk everything rather than go back to sleep in it. The sleeper is safe. The waking one is in danger. And the show, like the old texts, is clear that the danger is worth it. That refusal has a name in the Gnostic tradition. and it's the name the whole tradition is built on: Gnosis. Not knowledge of facts, the waking knowledge. The moment the trapped self realizes it's trapped, the moment it stops accepting the enclosure as reality and thinks, this is not all there is something above this. I have been lied to about what I am. That recognition, that first crack of suspicion that the world you are given is not the whole of the real, is the beginning of every soul's liberation, in the Gnostic vision. And it's exactly what the innies begin to do. They begin to know, and the instant they begin to know, they become dangerous to the system, because a soul that suspects it's imprisoned cannot be governed the way a sleeping one can. And notice what wakes them. It isn't a lecture, it's contact, a glimpse of the world outside, a message from above, the discovery that they have an outie, a truer self, a whole life beyond the floor. In the show, the innies get pieces of evidence that there's more, an escape, a note, a moment where an innie briefly surfaces in the outside world and sees it. The Gnostics called that the call, the message from the true self, from home, that pierces the sleep and says, in effect, wake up. Remember, there's more than the floor. You are more than the worker they told you are. The waking doesn't come from inside the system's logic. It comes from a signal that gets through from outside it. A crack of the real, breaking into the enclosure. And here is the most moving thing the show does with the waking. The thing that keeps it from being cold. The innies, once they begin to wake, want two things. They want out, and they want to be known. They ache to know who their outie is, whether they're a good person, whether anyone out there in the real world knows they exist and cares. That longing, the trapped self reaching for its true self, wanting to be reunited, wanting to be whole, is the exact engine of the Gnostic path. The soul, once it wakes, doesn't just want escape, it wants reunion, it wants to close the split. Which brings us finally to you, because you have an innie and an outie too, and no one asked your permission either. But the show refuses to make it simple, and this is where it gets genuinely deep, because the truer self, the outie, is not always innocent. Two things about the outies complicate the whole picture, and both are, if anything, more Gnostic than a clean version would be. The first, one of these innies discovers that her outie is not some kind rescuer waiting above, but a member of the very family that built the whole system, powerful, complicit, invested in keeping the enclosure running. The truer self, in her case, is part of the machinery of the trap. That's a hard, honest note, and the Gnostics knew it too. Waking up is not always a matter of a pure higher self reaching down to save a poor lower one. Sometimes the self above is entangled in the very forgetting, has its own reasons for staying asleep, its own comfort in the arrangement. The path to wholeness isn't just the innie climbing up to a perfect outie, it's both halves having to change. The second is quieter and sadder, and it's the emotional heart of the show. Why did the main character sever himself in the first place? To escape grief. He lost the person he loved most, and he could not bear the pain of it, so he chose to become someone who for 8 hours a day doesn't remember she ever existed. Sit with that. Because it's a profound Gnostic insight in disguise, often the soul chooses the forgetting. The severance, the sleep, the descent into a self that doesn't remember, it isn't only done to us. Sometimes we do it to ourselves, on purpose, to avoid a pain we can't face. We sever ourselves from our own depths because the depths hurt. And then, we forget we did it. But here's the thread that runs through even that. Love is what calls him back. The lost beloved turns out not to be as lost as he thought, and the pull toward her, the refusal of the severed heart to fully forget the one it loved, becomes the very thing that starts to crack the sleep open. The Gnostics said the same. What finally wakes the soul is not usually an argument. It's love, the pull of the real, of the beloved, of home, reaching through the forgetting and refusing to let you stay asleep. The thing the Severance was designed to bury turns out to be the thing that undoes it. Here's the turn, and it's the reason this show unsettles people at a level they can't quite explain. You didn't get the surgery. There's no chip in your head, but the Gnostics said you are severed anyway, that every human being walks around divided in exactly the way the show makes literal, and that the division is so normal, so total, that almost no one notices it's there. You have an innie, the working, worrying, consuming self that knows only this world, the self that gets up, performs the tasks, refines the numbers, manages the fears, and takes the enclosure of ordinary life to be the whole of reality. And you have an outie, in the deeper sense, a truer self, your origin, the spark, the part of you that came from somewhere else, and that the working self has never met and can barely imagine, and you live, almost entirely, as the innie. Down on the floor, under the lights, having forgotten there's a sun. That's why the show doesn't feel like science fiction while you're watching it. It feels like recognition, because some part of you knows that the innie's condition is your condition, that you too spend your days in an enclosure of tasks whose ultimate purpose you were never told, serving a system you didn't design, so busy refining your own numbers that you rarely stop to ask the question the whole thing is built to keep you from asking, what am I really, and is this all there is? Severance didn't invent that horror. It just gave you a way to see the one you're already living. And that means the innie's rebellion is not really about them. It's an instruction. The thing they fight for, to suspect there's more than the floor, to refuse the story that serving is your whole purpose, to reach for the truer self above, is the exact thing available to you, not by escaping your job, by waking up inside your life, by catching, even for a moment, the suspicion the innie's caught, that you are more than the working self, that there is a sun above the fluorescent lights, that the enclosure is not the whole of the real, and that the part of you that senses this is the part that's finally starting to wake. And looking up is smaller and nearer than it sounds. That's the mercy of it. The innies don't escape by storming the building. They begin by simply noticing, by letting the suspicion in, by refusing, for one moment, to take the floor as the whole world. For you, it's the same. It's the quiet moment when you step back from the tasks and the worry and feel, even faintly, that you are the one aware of all this and not merely the one drowning in it. It's the stillness in which the fluorescent hum drops away and something older in you says, this is not all I am. You don't have to quit your life. You have to catch yourself living as the innie, and, in the catching, you've already started to wake. Because the part of you that can notice the enclosure is, by definition, not fully trapped in it. The Gnostics said that noticing is the spark. Stirring, the one who can see the cage is already, a little, standing outside it. Now, before I close, let me be honest about what this is and isn't, because I owe you that. A couple of honest notes. Severance is a television show. It's fiction, made by writers doing something brilliant, and I'm not claiming they sat down with a Nag Hammadi library and encoded ancient doctrine into a workplace thriller. I don't know what was in their heads, and I'm not going to pretend I do. What I'm showing you is that the shape of the show and the shape of the Gnostic vision are the same shape, because it's a shape the human imagination keeps arriving at when it looks hard at the strangeness of being a self. The show asks the questions. It doesn't preach the answers. That's part of why it's good. And the Gnostic material itself is old and varied and doesn't come as one tidy system. I've drawn the clearest line through it, the divided self, the false world, the false god. The forgetting, the waking, the reunion, because that line is real and the show walks right down it. But it's a line through a much larger and stranger territory, and I've kept it clean on purpose. None of which changes the thing underneath, the thing the show touched and the old texts were built around. The division is real. Most people live as the innie and die as the innie, never having met the self above the floor. And the waking, the suspicion that there's more, the refusal to accept the enclosure as everything, is real too, and it's the most important thing that can happen to a person. The show dramatizes it. The Gnostics mapped it. And you're the one it's actually about. So here's where it lands. Severance is a horror story about a self cut in two, a hidden self trapped on a windowless floor, labouring forever for a system it didn't choose, worshipping a founder who is not its true source, forbidden from remembering where it came from, and slowly, dangerously, beginning to wake. And the reason it grips you, the reason you can't stop thinking about it, is that it's not a fantasy. It's a diagram. It's the oldest diagram there is of the thing the Gnostics said had happened to your soul, severed, sleeping, labouring in an enclosure, having forgotten the sun. But the whole show bends toward one thing: the crack, the waking, the innie who looks up. And that's the part that's for you. You don't need a chip removed. You need the suspicion the innie's caught, that you are more than the self that works and worries and refines the numbers, that there's a truer self above the floor, and that the ache you feel to be more, to be known, to be whole, to get out, is not a malfunction. It's the beginning of remembering. It's your outie calling down. It's the sun getting through. The written work is at Enlightens, Guru, and the discount on the books is in the comments if you want to start closing the split tonight. The podcast's on Spotify, for the nights you'd rather close your eyes and be led down into this in the dark. No rush. The floor isn't going anywhere. But you don't have to be only the one standing on it. You've been severed your whole life. The good news is the same as the show's. Some part of you is starting to look up. Rest well and wake up.